I really don't think the UFC White House event is what the sport needs right now. And this isn't me taking a political stance by any means, because I could not care less about that sort of thing. That's not what I focus on. I focus on the sport. But I think we've had big events like this relatively recently. I think UFC 300 is kind of going to be similar to what this event is when it comes to actual fights. However, which I think is awesome when we get a card like that where it's top to bottom stacked. Every single fight, could be a main card fight on any other card. Multiple main event caliber fights on the main card. And I love that sort of thing. Trust me, I love a full night of fights where everything is going to be an absolute banger. However, I don't think that this is the type of atmosphere you want to do that in, right? I think when you have, 1,000, 5,000 people outside, not an arena, people that aren't UFC fans, maybe they watch occasionally, maybe they're knowledgeable about the sport a little bit, they're aware of the sport, but not having diehard UFC fans in an arena, it's not the same. Even from watching at home, the perspective of watching at home, not being in the arena, having an arena full of people yelling and screaming and going nuts when something happens, it adds to the event, even from being at home, let alone being in the arena. If you haven't been to a UFC event before, I really urge you, if you can get the money to go. It's obviously not cheap. Go though, because it's unlike anything else. It really is. It's you're all like one thing watching. You're all tuned in right there. You're feeling the same thing that everyone else is. It's unlike anything else, truly. And being at home, you kind of get a little bit of that as well. But if we have this event with people that are there just to socialize and not actually in the event, into the sport, it's not great. I think it's unfortunate when we get these sorts of things, when you get tons of fights and you almost use up these fights for something that, for people that won't really truly appreciate it. If we get a Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje, I think that's a great fight personally. I do. And a lot of people are talking on it as if, they don't want to put Justin Gaethje versus Ilia Topuria as the main event or even on the UFC White House card because they're worried that Justin Gaethje will get knocked out. And I get that. Me too. I'd be also worried about that a little bit. But at the same time, if that's what you expect, right, put it on the card. If that's what you expect, I think it's very possible. Put it on the card and say you have a 10, 20% chance of Justin Gaethje winning. Think about that, right? Like, what is America built on? Is built on, coming from being underdogs to winning. Yes, Justin Gaethje might and probably will get knocked out. But if he doesn't, think about that. The ultimate underdog win on what truthfully will be the biggest stage. Like, yes, as a hardcore MMA fan, as someone who appreciates the sport, the UFC, for what it is, not just a casual fan tuning into all these things, this might not be what we want. We want a packed arena in, somewhere where all the fans are going to appreciate. This might not be that. We're not going to have all the hardcore fans in the arena and stuff, and there's going to be a bunch of billionaires and all that stuff that people have been talking about. But what could make up for that would be a Justin Gaethje underdog win, something like that. That could work. But just, truthfully, as a whole, I don't think that this is what the UFC needs right now. I don't think we need to be getting too tied into politics. And that's not me being a little weirdo, be like, oh, politics this, politics that. Like, yes, I understand they're kind of relatively intertwined. It's how it is. It's just how the sport is. And I don't mind that a little bit. But I don't think that this is what's going to drive the UFC forward and get more casual fans, because casual fans are important. At the end of the day, that's what drives the sport forward. Not everyone that watches this sport is going to be a hardcore fan. That's why we have big events. It's for the casual fan. That's why we put together fights like, I don't know, that's why you bring Conor back, I think, though, this isn't the way to get more fans into the sport. It might bring more eyes to the sport for that time being, but I don't think it's going to get more people into the sport having something like this. And, yeah, I don't know. This is a bit of a rant, but I just don't think that this is what you want. However, now looking actually at the event and some fights that I think would be good, because I don't think it's going to be the greatest idea to to use up all of our big fights that are actually important for the future of the sport. Fights like Alex Pereira versus Cyril Gane. I don't think fights like that you want to use up. I think you want to, in this situation, bring back a Conor McGregor, which I'm not personally super stoked on. But if he wants to come back, he wants to come back. But you got to make the right fight for him. I mentioned the other day a Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz or a Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier. I think those are really the only two fights that kind of make sense, that are big, yet also, you don't want to put, I saw people saying Conor McGregor versus Carlos Prates, and I love Conor. He's awesome. He's a great fighter. He gets chinned brutally. It's just the truth. You want a fight where there's intrigue, there's history, there's legacy, there's a chance for either fighter to win. You don't want a fight where Conor is going to 100% beat someone, and you don't want a fight where Conor is 100% going to lose. You want a fight where it's competitive, like a Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor. One of those, I think those two are the easiest or easily the biggest fights, or the best fights for Conor to come back for. I think another good fight to have on this card is Amanda Nunes versus Kayla Harrison. I think it's important for the sport, yet also it's kind of appealing to casuals a little bit. I think it's a little bit of everything there as well. I don't mind, like I mentioned before, I don't mind a Justin Gaethje versus Ilia Topuria, purely because the opportunity that Justin Gaethje has to win as an underdog on objectively a giant stage for America. I don't think that's a bad fight to have on here. I think avoiding fights like I mentioned, Alex Pereira, Islam Makhachev, even Hamzat versus Strickland, I don't think I want on here. These are giant fights, of course, but I think they are too important for the future of the UFC to have on a fight card like this. And that's just my opinion. I think, of course I'll watch these fights. I watch every weekend and stuff, but I'm not super stoked on not having real UFC fans at the arena, because I don't think that's going to be what's going to be like. It's going to be cool. It's going to be cool to watch. It's going to be a cool event. I'm just not super stoked on it as a whole. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this. I'm really kind of torn on it, but yeah, I appreciate you guys watching.